Hello there, friend from 2024. My name is Bastien, and I'm speaking to you from the year 2350. I know that might sound impossible to you, but bear with me. I have a story to tell you about a day that nearly brought down everything we've built here in Silicon City. You see, in your time, you worry about forgetting your keys or losing your phone. Those inconveniences seem almost quaint to us now. Here in 2350, a moment of absent-mindedness can literally threaten the lives of 12 million people. Let me explain what I do, and then you'll understand why a simple mistake nearly became a catastrophe that would have echoed through history. I'm what we call a grid keeper. Think of me as a digital guardian for our city's neural network. Every morning, I wake up in my apartment on the 847th floor of Tower 7, and the first thing I see through my panoramic window is the sprawling expanse of Silicon City stretching toward the horizon. The buildings pulse with soft blue light, indicating that all systems are running smoothly. That light is my responsibility. Our city isn't just smart, it's alive in ways your generation could never imagine. Every street lamp, every transport pod, every climate control system, every security scanner is connected through an intricate web of artificial intelligence that we call the Nexus Grid. It breathes, it learns, it adapts, and most importantly, it protects us. But like any living system, it needs constant care and updates to stay healthy. This is where people like me come in. We're the ones who maintain the delicate balance between human oversight and artificial intelligence. Each morning, I receive a series of smart patches, tiny crystalline devices no bigger than your thumbnail that contain critical security updates for different sectors of the city. These patches aren't just software, they're living code that integrates seamlessly with our AI systems, strengthening their defenses against cyber threats that grow more sophisticated every day. The process is methodical, almost ritualistic. I collect the patches from the Central Distribution Hub, a gleaming facility at the heart of our city where hundreds of quantum processors work around the clock to generate these updates. The patches arrive in specialized containment units that keep them stable until deployment. Each one is coded with biometric locks that respond only to authorized grid keepers like myself. On a typical day, I might carry patches for the transportation network, the atmospheric processors, the waste management systems, or the residential security grids. Each patch represents months of work by our most brilliant programmers and AI specialists. They're designed to anticipate threats that haven't even emerged yet, to close vulnerabilities that exist only in theoretical models. The weight of responsibility is something I feel every single day. When I walk through the corridors of the Grid Maintenance Center, passing colleagues who nod with the quiet understanding that comes from shared burden, I'm reminded that our work keeps civilization functioning. The patches I carry aren't just data, they're the difference between order and chaos, between security and vulnerability. But here's what makes my job particularly crucial: the patches I handle are for the Alpha Grid, the primary security network that protects our most sensitive infrastructure. While my colleagues might work on traffic management or environmental controls, I deal with the systems that guard our power plants, our communication networks, and our defense mechanisms. One corrupted patch, one security breach in the Alpha Grid, and the cascading failures could shut down everything that keeps 12 million people alive. The irony isn't lost on me that in trying to make our city perfectly secure, we've created a system so interconnected that a single point of failure could bring it all down. It's like building a magnificent glass cathedral, beautiful, functional, but one crack in the wrong place and the whole structure could shatter. That's why protocols exist for everything we do. Triple verification for patch authenticity. Biometric confirmation at every step. Secure transport containers that would make your military jealous. We've thought of every possible failure mode, every potential security breach, every way someone might try to compromise our systems. Or so we thought. Because sometimes, the greatest threats don't come from elaborate schemes or sophisticated hackers. Sometimes, they come from the most human of failings, a moment of distraction, a routine so familiar it becomes automatic, a simple mistake that seems insignificant until it isn't. I should have known something was wrong the moment I felt that familiar weight missing from my jacket pocket. You know that sensation when you reach for your keys or your wallet and find empty space? That split second of confusion before the panic sets in. That's exactly what hit me as I stood in the transport pod, halfway between the archive and the central grid station. My hand had moved automatically to check the patch container, a habit so ingrained after 15 years that I didn't even think about it. The reinforced titanium case, about the size of your smartphone but thicker, should have been there, its edges sharp against my palm through the fabric. Instead, my fingers found nothing but the smooth lining of my pocket. I froze. Actually froze, like my neural pathways had suddenly jammed. The transport pod hummed around me, its gentle acceleration barely noticeable, but I felt like the world had tilted sideways. My heart started doing this stuttering rhythm that reminded me why we'd evolved fear responses in the first place. No, I whispered, and immediately felt foolish for talking to myself. But the word escaped anyway, carrying all the weight of what this could mean. I checked my other pocket. Nothing. Then my shoulder bag, fumbling through the compartments with increasing desperation. Work tablet, lunch container, spare stylus, identification cards, everything exactly where it should be except for the one thing that absolutely had to be there. The Alpha Grid security patch. Gone. I tried to reconstruct the last hour, forcing my mind to replay every step. I'd retrieved the patch from the archive's secure vault, following the same procedure I'd done hundreds of times. Biometric scan, authorization code, physical confirmation of the patch's integrity. The archive's AI, Minerva, had logged the transaction at exactly 14:23. I remembered sliding the container into my jacket pocket, feeling its reassuring weight settle against my ribs. Then what? The walk through the archive's corridors, past the endless rows of data cores humming their quiet songs. The brief conversation with Elena about the weather modification systems acting up again. The routine security checkpoint at the archive's exit, where I'd shown my credentials to the scanning array. And then, nothing. A blank space where my memory should have been crystal clear. The transport pod announced our arrival at Central Grid Station, its synthetic voice cheerful and oblivious to my growing terror. As the doors slid open, I realized I was sweating despite the pod's perfect climate control. Other passengers moved past me, their faces showing the casual indifference of people going about their normal day, completely unaware that somewhere in our city, a piece of technology capable of rewriting our most critical security systems was sitting unguarded. You have to understand what this patch represented. It wasn't just software, it was a complete reconfiguration of the Alpha Grid's threat assessment protocols. New encryption keys, updated behavioral analysis algorithms, enhanced intrusion detection systems. In the right hands, it would make our city more secure than ever before. In the wrong hands. I stepped off the transport pod on unsteady legs, my mind racing through the possibilities. If someone found the patch and managed to activate it without proper authorization, they wouldn't just gain access to our security systems, they'd essentially become them. They could blind our surveillance networks, disable our emergency response protocols, even manipulate the defensive barriers that protected our most vital infrastructure. But worse than any external threat was the patch's failsafe system. If it detected tampering or unauthorized activation, it would assume a complete system compromise and trigger what we called a scorched earth protocol. Every connected system would immediately isolate itself, cutting all communication, all coordination, all the invisible threads that held our city together. Imagine if every traffic light, every power grid, every water treatment plant suddenly decided it couldn't trust any other system and shut down all external connections. 12 million people would be trapped in a city that had forgotten how to function. I pulled out my work tablet, hands shaking as I accessed the tracking protocols. Every patch container had embedded location beacons, precisely for situations like this. But as the scanner loaded, my heart sank further. The beacon was active, but its signal was weak and intermittent, exactly what you'd expect if the container was damaged or if someone was deliberately trying to block its transmission. The last clear reading placed it somewhere in the lower district, in a sector I'd never had reason to visit. A maze of older buildings, converted industrial spaces, and the kind of places where people went when they didn't want to be found. Standing there in the gleaming corridors of Central Grid Station, watching the normal flow of city life continue around me, I realized I had perhaps 6 hours before the patch's scheduled integration. 6 hours to find a small titanium case in a city of 12 million people, retrieve it safely, and prevent what could be the greatest security disaster in our history. The worst part? I couldn't even report it missing without triggering immediate lockdown protocols that would shut down half the city while security teams conducted their search. The cure would be almost as devastating as the disease. I was completely, utterly on my own. I've never moved so fast through the city's transport tubes. Each second that passed felt like another step toward disaster, and the lower district seemed impossibly far away despite the magnetic trains that could cross the entire metropolitan area in 20 minutes. I kept checking my tablet, watching that weak signal pulse like a dying heartbeat, praying it wouldn't disappear entirely. The lower district hit me like stepping into a different century. Where Central Grid was all flowing curves and bioluminescent panels, down here the architecture was harsh angles and exposed metal. The air tasted different too, not recycled and purified, but somehow more real, carrying scents of cooking food and industrial lubricants and human activity. People moved differently here, with a wariness I wasn't used to seeing in the upper levels. My tracking device led me through increasingly narrow streets, past converted warehouses and underground markets where vendors sold everything from vintage electronics to black market neural enhancers. I tried to look casual, just another citizen going about their business, but I could feel eyes following me. My clothes, my posture, even the way I held my tablet, everything screamed that I didn't belong here. The signal was getting stronger, but also more erratic. One moment it would spike, indicating I was close, then it would fade to almost nothing. I found myself standing at the entrance to what looked like an abandoned subway station, one of the old ones from before the magnetic tube system was installed. The tracker was going crazy, the signal jumping between full strength and complete darkness every few seconds. That's when I heard voices echoing from somewhere below. Definitely government tech. Look at these encryption layers. Can you crack it? Give me time. But if this is what I think it is, we're talking about serious money. The kind of people who buy this stuff don't ask questions. My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the concrete wall, trying to hear more while my mind raced through increasingly terrible scenarios. If they managed to access the patch, they wouldn't just be selling city security data, they'd be selling the keys to every automated system that kept 12 million people alive. I had to get down there, but the entrance was clearly visible from where they were working. I could hear the soft hum of illegal tech scanners, the kind that could strip encryption from military-grade hardware given enough time. Professional data thieves, not just opportunistic scavengers who'd found something valuable. My hands were sweating as I activated my tablet's emergency protocols, sending a coded message to my supervisor that would buy me a few more hours before anyone expected a status report. Then I did something that would have been unthinkable 6 hours ago. I accessed the black market apps that existed in the darker corners of the city's network. If I was going to retrieve that patch, I needed help from people who understood this world better than I did. People who knew how to move unseen, how to negotiate with thieves, how to survive in places where the city's protective systems didn't reach. The irony wasn't lost on me. To save the city's security grid, I was about to trust criminals. The next few hours blurred together like a fever dream. Through contacts I never thought I'd need, I found myself working with a crew of reformed data runners who specialized in retrieval operations. Maya, their leader, had silver circuits tattooed along her jawline, marks of someone who'd interfaced directly with illegal AI systems and lived to tell about it. "Your patch is already partially cracked," she told me as we crouched in a maintenance tunnel beneath the black market district. "My scanners show they've accessed about 30% of the encryption. Give them another 6 hours, and they'll have everything." My chest tightened. "Can we get it back?" She smiled, but it wasn't reassuring. "For what you're paying. We'll get it back or die trying." The operation itself was a masterclass in controlled chaos. Maya's team moved through the underground market like ghosts, using electromagnetic scramblers to blind security cameras and neural disruptors to confuse the automated guards. I followed behind, my city-issued credentials feeling absurdly legitimate in this world of shadows and stolen tech. When we finally cornered the thieves in their makeshift lab, the confrontation was surprisingly brief. These weren't ideological terrorists or desperate revolutionaries, they were businesspeople who understood risk versus reward. When faced with Maya's reputation and my offer of triple their potential profit, they handed over the patch without a fight. "Smart choice," Maya said as she verified the device's integrity. "Though I have to ask, what kind of city engineer carries black market currency?" I didn't answer. Some questions were better left hanging in the recycled air of the underground. Back in my apartment 12 hours later, I sat staring at the recovered patch, now safely locked in a containment field. The official report would be sanitized, equipment malfunction, routine recovery, no security compromise detected. My supervisor had accepted my explanation without question, probably relieved that a potentially career-ending incident had been resolved quietly. But I couldn't stop thinking about how close we'd come to disaster. 30% encryption breach meant they'd already seen fragments of the security grid's architecture. In the wrong hands, even that partial data could have been weaponized. More troubling was how easily I'd adapted to operating outside the system. The black market contacts, the illegal currency, the willingness to work with criminals, it had all felt surprisingly natural. As if some part of me had been waiting for permission to step into that darker world. I poured myself a glass of synthetic wine and walked to my window, looking out at the city's gleaming towers. Millions of people going about their lives, trusting that systems like the one I maintained would keep them safe. They had no idea how fragile that safety really was, how much it depended on people like me not making careless mistakes. The patch incident had taught me something uncomfortable about myself, and about the city we'd built. For all our technological advancement, for all our automated perfection, we were still human. Still fallible. Still capable of losing something as simple as a data patch and nearly bringing down the entire system as a result. I activated the patch's final security protocols and watched as it dissolved into quantum foam, its data safely integrated into the city's grid. Crisis averted, reputation intact, lessons learned. But as I settled into bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That somewhere in the city's vast network of systems and safeguards, other vulnerabilities were waiting to be discovered. Other moments of human error that could cascade into something catastrophic. The city slept peacefully around me, its AI guardians watching over every street and building. And I lay awake, wondering if we'd built something too complex for us to truly control, too important for us to ever risk losing. Tomorrow, I'd go back to being just another systems engineer. But tonight, I was someone who'd seen how thin the line really was between order and chaos.